following is a Mad Owl presentation.
Hello everybody, it's Raul. Welcome to another episode of the Closing Tag Podcast. This is the best of episode 21. And I know what you're going to say. Best ofs are cliche and lazy. Yes, they are. But I'm doing it anyway. I should be back to my normal format roughly around January 16th. So in the meantime, I do want to remind everybody that this best of episode, along with every episode of the Closing Tag Podcast, is available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and so many others, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. And we're able to do this to you free of charge because of our amazing sponsor, and that is Galactic Blue, your professional web development, graphic design, and logo design resource. Visit galacticblue.net for more information on how your business can benefit from our services. And with that, I present episode 21. It's a best of episode of the Closing Tag Podcast. Thanks to everybody for watching and for listening. Enjoy. Common theme that is laid in the background of the Closing Tag Podcast from episode 1 all the way through episode 20 has been the theme of progress. Progress in society, progress in technology, progress in politics. Unfortunately, one group of people that have been very vocally opposed to any kind of progress has been hardline conservatives. In the first episode of the podcast, really what was the first true rant, I try to sympathize with opponents of progress and then proceed to propose how we progress anyway. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag Podcast.
Nobody cares about my white boy blue. Nobody cares about my white boy blue.
So everybody knows that there are two things in this world you don't want to talk about with others unless you're looking to stir up a little bit of controversy. Religion and politics. And for those that are on the outside, trust me when I say Utah is rife with people who believe they are on the right side of both. I am about to talk about politics, but I'm not going to express how elated and happy I am that Donald Trump, who I have adorned the moniker over the last 4 years of Emperor Tangerine, is no longer in office. In fact, I get it. I get why people like the guy. Now, set aside the snake oil salesman tactics, the failed business ventures, the countless lawsuits, the clear connections to white nationalism, and even the absolute pattern of corruption. Set all of that aside and look at the subliminal message being delivered to the core conservative base. Make America great again. I get the appeal. I really do. I get the appeal of wanting to return to a simpler, more easily digestible time. Conservatives by nature hate change, just in general. They don't like changes to how we eat, how we treat people different from us, and how we consume really anything. I mean, take a look at how they responded to the pandemic. From day one, they were the most vocal about not wanting to wear a mask. They were the most vocal about wanting to go back out to a normal life. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, though. But the normal life isn't coming back. Ever. nor the glory days of men being the only breadwinners and gay people being shunned into living a lie. Those days are gone. Just as soon, the days of consuming oil and coal will be gone. Just as the days of doing our normal grocery shopping will one day be gone, just like a lot of other things. Now, will there be remnants of those glory days still around? Eventually the days of going back to eating dinner at a restaurant or watching a movie in a theater? Yes, eventually. It'll take some time, but we'll get there. Also, conservatives love to blame the problem of not having enough jobs. This was before the pandemic, by the way, on illegals taking our jobs. How many times have you heard this? Those damn illegals from Mexico, they're taking our jobs without being able to speak English. I'm sure you've heard that a time or two. I hate to break it to you, Mexicans aren't taking your jobs. Robots are. More and more jobs are being automated. Think about it. When was the last time you went into a Walmart or a grocery store that didn't have 5 or more self-checkout lanes? When was the last time you went to a McDonald's that didn't have a self-order kiosk? When was the last time you called customer service for really anything and they didn't either A, reference you to their website, or B, try to solve your problem using their automated customer service? By the way, I really dislike that. I was trying to resolve a problem recently and they kept saying, go to the website, go to the website. If I felt like the website would do me any good, I wouldn't be on the phone, would I? Anyway, back to the topic. More and more cars are becoming self-driving. Combined with the increase in electrical manufacturing, oil demands will likely plummet and your friendly? Yeah, we'll go with friendly. Your friendly Uber driver will be replaced with a less friendly, albeit probably not as creepy, automated car. Truck drivers could also be on the chopping block. Think about it. Why would, say, Jeff Bezos want to pay a person that could easily fall asleep behind the wheel and cause a public relations nightmare to deliver that important package when a self-driving semi running on electricity would do just as good a job for the cost of maintenance? This is why I vocally and openly declared myself on Facebook the other day Team Bernie Sanders and Team Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They see the trend coming a mile away like I see it. Let's face it, the fact is progress is hard. Progress is frightening. But progress is also inevitable. You can hitch your wagons to the last remnant of those golden days, want to make America great again, and hope to beat back the winds of change. But those winds, those same winds of change, were strong enough to tear down monarchies, slavery, and oppressive walls. And it's strong enough to tear down the last remaining fragments of what was once the greatest economy in the world. Now to the part you're not going to like. I'm about to offer a solution to the problem. I'm about to say something that may trigger more than half my audience, so just prefacing what I'm about to say with that. You ready? My solution is democratic socialism. I know, the dreaded S word. Trigger. A lot of people equate that word with communism and the old Soviet Union. But what if, and hear me out on this, what if we took the good of socialism but leave out the bad? Hear me out on this. Keep the capitalist drive and system that once made America what it once was, but without the people dying because they can't afford to go see a doctor. So the way I would do it is this. Have a baseline income that would allow the average American citizen just enough for rent, basic utilities and food. Very similar to how the welfare system works now, but it would apply to every American so long as they're an American citizen. Add into that free public transportation and free medical care. Then, if that citizen wants to make extra income on top of that, be it a business of their own or working somewhere else, they can do that without being penalized. You still have that system in place that incentivizes you to do more if you want more, but also doesn't penalize you if you're out of work. And let's face it, at the rate progress is going, there are going to be a lot of people who will be out of work before all is said and done. Now, you're probably asking who is going to pay for this. Well, it's simple. Build the top 1%. So your Bill Gates, your Elon Musks, your Jeff Bezos, your Warren Buffetts. Put a cap on how much one person can make. There's not a single good reason why any one human being should ever have more than, rough ballpark, $10 billion. Just isn't. That's more money than 5 generations of people can spend in their lifetimes, even if you take inflation into account. So put it to good use for once, instead of it sitting in some rich cat's escrow account overseas. I'd rather have a butthurt billionaire groaning about not being able to go over that threshold than see another 400,000 people die in a year because we as a society are either too lazy or too stubborn to do anything about it. The time to act on the coming changes was last year when the pandemic hit. Let's be honest. The pandemic should have been a learning tool for how we should proceed going forward with society. It's still not too late. We can affect these economic changes soon so that those without work that want to work can still make a livable income. And really, times like these, that's all anybody can ask for.
Nobody cares about my white boy blues.
In a segment that kind of faded away after the first few episodes, and really something that I'm planning on bringing back, I've managed to squeeze in some coding tips at the end of each episode. The first 2 episodes of the podcast, I take a look at how to auto-update the copyright year on your website, which coming up with New Year's Eve right around the corner, this could come in handy very soon. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast. Enjoy! So something that drives me absolutely bonkers, grinds my gears as a developer, is seeing this nice, gorgeous, clean-looking, responsive website. By the way, responsive is when a website automatically adjusts itself to screen size, so big for desktop, small for phones. And you scroll to the bottom as you get ready to see how to contact the company, contact the developer, what have you, maybe look at a sitemap, and only to find the copyright is at least 2 years out of date. I understand because we're just barely hitting February of 2021. If the copyright were a 2020 year, I get that. That's forgivable. Life gets busy. Things have to be approved by a number of stakeholders. You want to make sure it doesn't break code. I get it. But 2018, 2017, going back, I kid you not, as far back as I've seen as 2014 recently, no. Just no. I don't like using the word triggered, But that's a trigger for me. As a developer, I'm triggered by this. So, today, I am going to show you a few tips on how to keep that copyright year up to snuff automatically. So you do it one time, and then that way, once January 1st hits at midnight, as the calendar turns the year, so does your website. No further upkeep needed on your part because the code does it for you. And I'm going to show you how to do that in PHP, in JavaScript, and even show you a working example of that in React. That way you have multiple options on how to keep that copyright year up to snuff. I may only have time to do the PHP part for this particular episode, and then we'll hit JavaScript and React on the next one. How's that sound? So I am going to switch screens here, right here. All right. This is courtesy of CSStricks.com. So as you can see, let me increase the size here so you get a better view. For those of you that are on YouTube, you can take a look. So if you want just the current year in your PHP code, by the way, if you're doing this in PHP, you need to save the HTML file as a .php file. So then that way it's, more up to snuff and it's actually going to work. So you want to do an ampersand copy semicolon and then space, and then open your tag, open your PHP tag. So open caret question mark PHP space echo space date, and then open parentheses, open quote, capital Y, so the letter Y but capitalized, close the quotation, close the parentheses, semicolon, space, question mark, closing caret. Really, that's it. That's literally it. That's how you do it in PHP. Now, if you wanted to get fancy with it, as you can see here on my screen, you can do a start year with an error protection. You can do a start year. So if you want to, let people know, like, hey, this is what year we started as a business, and this is what the year currently is. Kind of give it a little bit more, flavor, if you will. You can easily do that. Basically do an auto copyright. There's a lot of different uses that you can use this for, and it makes your PHP site that much more professional looking. I'm telling you right now, people get turned off way easily by this sort of thing. Even if they don't necessarily do it intentionally, it is a subliminal thing. I promise you. I promise you're going to have a lot better time with this. By the way, if you're doing WordPress sites, they do this automatically for you. It's already done when you start up your WordPress site. Same thing with Drupal, same thing with Magento. All the CMS sites, or site builders, if you will, already do this automatically. So there's no reason for you not to. Now, as you might recall in our last episode, we were demonstrating how to change the dreaded copyright at the bottom of a web page automatically without needing to manually change it every January. Trust me when I tell you, I've worked on over 300 websites over my 10, 11-year career. Changing a website on changing the copyright on every single one of those websites is brutal. And especially when before, I started transitioning over to React, having to change it on every single page was even more brutal. So I'm going to show you in both JavaScript and React on how to change that copyright automatically. So if you will follow me to the big screen here, I'm going to increase the size of the font here. So courtesy of KirstenMartin.com, which is I guess a Squarespace educator, as it says right here, you can change your copyright in line with JavaScript. So simply put, all you gotta do is open your paragraph tag, put in copyright, ampersand copy, semicolon, open your script tag, and just put the JavaScript code in there. Document.write, open parentheses, new date, with date being capital D, open and close parentheses, dot get full year, open close parentheses, and then close parentheses again, and then close the script tag. As long as JavaScript is enabled on your website, you should be able to pull this off. I've tested it a couple times, it works great. But the way that I have been doing it lately seems to work a little bit better. So I'm going to pull that up right now. Since I got to get in Visual Studio Code anyway, let me increase the font size here as well. Now, for those of you that are seeing this either on Twitch or on YouTube, great. I'm going to break it down, though, for everybody that can't see it as kind of a play-by-play. So what I'm looking at right now is the footer component for Paddywhack Homemade Gifts, which is the site that I alluded to earlier that Tiger is a part of. So you've got your imports. These are really not all that important. The big thing that you want to keep in mind is this return. So obviously we're going to start with the div, and that would be a dog sneezing in the background. Open the container. I have container imported from React Strap, which is something I'm going to change when I change the website. Just because I like React Bootstrap a little bit better. Have the copyright right here. So the important part is ampersand copy semicolon, and then this part right here is encased in curly brackets. So it's basically the exact same as what was shown on the JavaScript thing. Basically, all you're doing with those curly brackets is you're encasing JavaScript. Those are the opening and closing script tags. And you don't have to use document.write or anything like that. You just basically have the new date, get full year. And I guarantee if you're doing a React site, if you're doing a React web app, this is going to save you time and money. And as a web developer, both are going to come at very high price. So, all of that being said, I implore you to do the research on your own, especially if you're an up-and-coming developer. Definitely reach out on the Discord channel, which again is included in the description. The link is included in the description. I also will be including it in the description for both YouTube and the pod. And, do a Google search. I promise you, you are not going to vaporize or disintegrate into dust because Thanos was not happy that you Google searched the solution to your problem and decided, nope, you're done, bye. He's not going to do that. I promise you. You're fine. So, really, in back-to-back episodes, I touched on this misconception of cancel culture. The first rant goes off on the distance between Cara Dune, or Gina Carano rather, getting fired by Disney, and Joss Whedon keeping his Warner Media job. The second touches more on Lola Bunny and Pepe Le Pew. Yes, I did a whole rant on people's outrage over two cartoon characters. Just goes to show you never know what will happen. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast.
Nobody cares about my white boy blue. Nobody cares about my white boy blue.
So before I start this next take, I wanted to say that yes, I am aware of the sexual misconduct allegations levied against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, and if those allegations turn out to be true, he deserves every bit of legal and civil repercussions that's coming to him. So I want to discuss something that's been kind of bugging me over the last few years. This misconception and fallacy of what some call cancel culture. Let me preface this next take with this. I do believe there are some instances of a company or studio making a rash and far too quick decision to cut ties with somebody just because they disagreed with what they said. Ironically enough, I use Disney firing James Gunn as a prime example. But for every James Gunn that gets wrongfully terminated from a job, there are 100 Kevin Spaceys, a dozen or so Cass Anvars, about 50 Tom Cruises, and at least 5 Gina Caranos. The entertainment industry, I think we can all agree, can be rife with just some vile, despicable, cruel human beings that take great pleasure in tormenting and bullying others into doing what they want. We've heard the stories over the years about Roman Polanski and his deviant nature. We've now heard from multiple sources regarding Kevin Spacey and his alleged sexual assault on young boys over the years. We've even started hearing from cast members from the hit TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer about what kind of sick, disgusting bully Joss Whedon is. This, of course, was in defense of Ray Fisher and his disputes with Warner Brothers and Whedon over alleged bullying on the set of Justice League. Let's keep one thing in mind as we discuss these things about entertainment in Hollywood. What one company or studio might consider unforgivable, another might consider just a minor inconvenience. Why do you think Joss Whedon was not invited back by Disney to do any more Marvel movies after the first Avengers, yet has continued to work for other studios in the meantime? Something to think about. Another thing to keep in mind is this misconception of what the First Amendment actually protects us from. So let's take it directly from the Bill of Rights, shall we? I'm quoting directly from the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So that's 1780s lawyer speak, so I'm just going to break it down for you. The First Amendment is basically saying that there cannot be any laws in place that prohibit you from saying whatever you want. I think we can all get on the same page there. The misconception comes when it comes to employers' rights to fire somebody based on what they said, or even a private company refusing service to somebody based on their behavior in their establishment. In many cases, I'm referring to Facebook and Twitter supposedly censoring people by removing their posts or banning them. Newsflash, by creating a Facebook or Twitter account, you agree to their terms of services. Perhaps read them next time? In short, freedom from criminal prosecution, not freedom from civil consequences. Disney in this case felt that between her tone-deaf comments about preferred pronouns and her comments seemingly comparing the daily struggles of being a conservative in a progressive society to being a Jew in Nazi Germany, yes, that happened, Gina Carano was more trouble than she was worth and decided to let her go. Disney was within that right to do so. Right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you disagree with the decision, whether you agree with it, whether you agree with her comment or not. All of that is irrelevant in this case. The fact is, Disney felt she violated their trust as a Disney employee, and she was fired as a result. Also keep in mind, this wasn't just solely based on the tweet about the Jews. That's a misconception or misinformation that's floating around out there. All we know about is that and the incident involving her seemingly mocking Mandalorian co-star Pedro Pascal's sister after she came out as a trans woman. Listen, I'm a huge Mandalorian fan. This is a huge Baby Yoda house. I like the Cara Dune character. But Disney felt a decision needed to be made, and they made it. Whether they were right to do so or not is besides the point. Again, freedom from criminal prosecution, not freedom from civil consequences. And listen, I agree with the notion that actors and producers get to keep their jobs after doing far worse. I mean, we just got done talking about a guy who has bullied actors for years on the sets of TV shows and movies and reportedly is still doing it. So I agree there. But again, Disney runs a very tight ship, and at the end of the day, their decision to not bring back Gina Carano and Warner Brothers' decision to continue using Joss Whedon are not in the same conversation. Again, I'm going to keep hammering this point home. Freedom from criminal prosecution, not freedom from civil consequences. Moral of the story, I know conservatives love to preach accountability and responsibilities for their actions, but maybe it's high time, especially after the Gina Carano fiasco, that conservatives actually practice what they preach. So before I start this next take, going back to what I briefly mentioned in passing in the last episode, New York, you need to get rid of Andrew Cuomo. There, I said it. Let's revisit a major topic from the last podcast, shall we? Since people don't seem to kind of grasp this concept. It's the idea of cancel culture. Now, recently, in wake of realizing that sexualizing cartoon characters and promoting characters that seem aggressive, we'll go with aggressive, towards their female counterparts might not be such a good idea in today's day and age. Warner Brothers recently made some changes to their fabled Looney Tunes lineup. First, they revised the character of Lola Bunny. If you remember in the 1996 cult classic Space Jam, Lola was the girl bunny that joined the team and won the heart of team co-captain Bugs Bunny. Lola's appearance has recently undergone a certain transformation, if you will. Because this is a PG podcast, I'll just say that she's undergone a reduction in size, if you catch my drift. This recent change sent Twitter into a major upheaval. Oh, how could they do this? This isn't the Lola Bunny I know. And that's just the comments I can read on the air. Then, in another move that sent Looney Tunes Nation into a pitchfork panic, as I like to call it, Warner Brothers decided to pull Pepe Le Pew from the Space Jam sequel entirely, citing, quote, a lack of the character's ability to relate to the current climate post-Me Too, end quote. Now, if you recall, Pepe Le Pew's entire shtick is based around a simple premise. He sees a girl cat
who has recently had white paint conveniently painted on her back in a pattern that has her resembling a girl's skunk. He falls head over heels over her and advances on her. She rejects his advances, and the chase begins. She eventually wears out, and he catches up to her. This continues over the course of the next 5 or so minutes until the end of the cartoon. The point is, if there was ever a case for Me Too, the girl cat from Pepe Le Pew would have the most legitimate case there is, because we all witnessed it firsthand. Of course, conservatives on Twitter threw around the term cancel culture because Pepe Le Pew was being canceled. Listen, I grew up on this stuff. I grew up on cartoons that were funny and entertaining, albeit extremely flawed. Looney Tunes, specifically, was full of just questionable characters that just made things that much more interesting. I mean, you had a potentially racist Western guy, Yosemite Sam. You had Bugs Bunny, who I argue was a bully to both Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck. You had Elmer Fudd, who was, he basically would have been flayed alive by PETA back in the day, if PETA was even a thing. Pepe Le Pew just happened to be the most blatantly obvious of the bunch. And yes, it's a bit annoying that Warner Brothers and HBO Max has now decided to put a disclaimer up on these cartoons warning people that the times back then, when these cartoons were made, were different from today's age. But it's necessary. Trusting people to be better than a bunch of cartoon characters from the 60s is how we got Me Too in the first place. It's how we got people that just can't take no for an answer in the first place. People failed to teach their children no means no, Sometimes people in charge of these properties have to step in and police them for us. Similar to the Dr. Seuss fiasco, where the publisher has decided to stop publishing certain Dr. Seuss books because of the questionable characters in those books that were depicted in a negative, some may argue racist light. You'd think, listening to conservatives on social media, that people were coming to take their Pepe Le Pew DVDs and their Dr. Seuss books, physically removing them from their home. As a disclosure, I happen to have one of the books in question. I happen to have one of the books that stopped publishing. And to think I saw it on Mulberry Street. I know the part they were describing. I knew when I first saw it that it would be a problem. I still read that book to this day to my daughter when I get her ready for bed. President Biden has not yet come by to round it up for the local book burning, nor has anybody in Gestapo getup come to take me away for illegally owning the book. Nobody is coming to take your books away from you. Nobody is saying you cannot own a copy of these books or watch Pepe Le Pew cartoons. They're just reminding people that people back in those days were wrong to glorify racism and men forcing themselves on women, and deservedly so. It's not cancel culture, it's accountability culture. I can understand that after getting away with treating women like less than men and people of different cultures like human trash for generations, how forcing society to say that's messed up and taking actions to ensure that the next generation knows how messed up that was and apologizing for it might come across as cancel culture. but it's called accountability. For a group of people that love to preach to others how they should be held accountable for their actions, conservatives have this amazing talent for refusing to hold themselves accountable for theirs. Not to mention, the same people that cried about Lola Bunny's appearance changes will cry about a song called WAP by Cardi B being performed at the Grammys as a sign of the devil coming to their homes. That kind of display is unfit for national television. And listen, I am not a Cardi B fan. I find a lot of her music to be leaving a lot to be desired. I find it lazy, uninspired, and only hitting the lowest common denominator. By the way, I feel the same about this Megan Thee Stallion as well as Nicki Minaj. Maybe it's because I'm one of those old fogies that grew up to some music that would, in my opinion, embarrass the hell out of these women. Music like En Vogue, TLC, SWV, Queen Latifah back before she dedicated herself solely to acting, Missy Elliott. These were women that knew how to invoke emotion when they performed and who knew how to be provocative without being too blatantly obvious about it. But question to all the people that were being offended by Cardi B's performance at the Grammys. Where the hell were you back in the 70s when we had songs like Afternoon Delight talking about getting a quick pick-me-up from the wife during lunch break? Where were you when there was this song called My Sharona? By the way, if I'm the knack, I'm nervous as hell that I'm next to be canceled or be held accountable. I mean, have you heard the lyrics to that song lately? Or where were you back when a member of TLC back in the early 90s would perform on stage with an eye patch made out of a condom? Or when Salt and Pepper wanted to talk about sex, baby? I mean, people that get so easily offended by Cardi B obviously have never heard Salt and Pepper's work. Ever. The point is, you can't go around crying about books and cartoon characters being held accountable for their actions and depicting women as objects and minorities as inferior to others, then turn around and complain about the appearance of a cartoon character, making it less likely that she too will be objectified, then turn right back around and complain about women objectifying themselves in song. That's not how this works. Also, I'll leave you with one final thought. I would think that these people would find better uses of all this free time that they clearly have on their hands if they're complaining about children's books and cartoon characters. I know it's been a rough 12 months for a lot of people, for everybody really. This pandemic has clearly and certainly gotten the better of everybody. I know I've been affected. May I suggest finding a hobby? Maybe take up painting, maybe take up stitching, or hell, learn a new skill on PERL site.
Nobody cares about my white boy blues.
Utah Jazz owner Ryan Smith has only owned the team for roughly 2 years now, but he's already made a significant impact on both the team and the community. Unfortunately, not everybody was or is a fan of his contributions, as you'll see in the upcoming rant. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast.
I'm back on the road.
So before this next take, if you had an office pool of betting which I was going to talk about in segment number 3, sports or politics, and your answer was both, you win. Now, if you recall in my sports segment on episode 3, I gave all the reasons why there should be both optimism and skepticism regarding the Utah Jazz. Spoiler alert, this segment is going to talk about the Utah Jazz some more. So since our last discussion, the Utah Jazz have remained at the top of the NBA standings at 42-15 as of this recording. With only a few weeks left in the regular season, they seem all but certain to have home court advantage in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs. And despite the insistence of one Ben Simmons, Rudy Gobert appears to be on an historic defensive tear this season, drawing comparisons to other defensive greats like Ben Wallace, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Dikembe Mutombo. But sadly, with all the good news, there is a level of bad that has to come with it. And no, I'm not talking about the fact that MVP candidate Donovan Mitchell sprained his ankle the other night and is now scheduled to miss the next 2 weeks. No, this pertains to the new majority owner of the Jazz, Ryan Smith. First, it should be noted that the Jazz, much like just about any publicly traded company, is owned by a group of shareholders, each one with their own level of influence and pull in the day-to-day decision-making of the business. After 30 plus years of owning the Jazz and committing to keeping the Jazz in Salt Lake City, the Miller family, headed by matriarch Gail Miller, sold the team in late 2000 to a group of investors led by local business guru Ryan Smith, no relation, who was once the owner and is now still the CEO of Qualtrics, a company based in Utah dedicated to the research and cure of various childhood cancers and diseases. If you've ever watched a Jazz game and you ever wonder what that Five for the Fight patch is all about, that's Qualtrics' pledge to fight against childhood cancer. Pretty awesome cause, right? But he's only the majority owner. He does not own 100% of the team. And don't worry, we'll get back to him in a bit because this take is mostly about him. Also part of this investment group that owns the Jazz is Australian billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes. On top of being a billionaire in Australia, Mike is also the man behind Atlassian. Now, if you're in web development like I am, you probably already know what Atlassian is, but just for those that aren't aware, Atlassian is the company that owns Bitbucket, a Git-based source code repository hosting service that offers both commercial plans and free accounts with an unlimited number of private repositories. Basically, it helps version control and helps developers collaborate on certain projects without stepping on each other's toes. It's the gist of it anyway. In addition to both Smith and Cannon-Brookes, the Jazz also has ownership stock owned by another billionaire, Ryan Sweeney. Sweeney is very much familiar with both Smith and Cannon-Brookes, as his company, Acel, helped fund and invest both Qualtrics and Atlassian. And just this past Friday, in a league-shattering, foundation-shaking announcement, the Utah Jazz announced that former player Dwayne Wade now has ownership stock of the team. That's right. 13-time All-Star, 3-time NBA champion, former Finals MVP, and the man responsible for creating the Miami Heat super trio of himself, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh, is now an active minority owner of the Utah Jazz. I give you a minute to let that sink in, but it's been 2 days and I'm not sure it's sunk in for me yet. While this is very exciting news, it was marred by some controversy here in the good old Rocky Mountains this past week. So as kind of a publicity thing, but also as kind of a challenge to the team, Majority owner Ryan Smith at the beginning of the season proclaimed that every time the Jazz win a game this season, whether it's the playoffs, regular season, preseason, doesn't matter, he will gift a full scholarship to a chosen high school student that is deemed as underprivileged and of minority descent. As of this recording, the Jazz have won 45 games total this season. 3 preseason games and 42 regular season games. The fact is, many minorities in this state, blacks, Mexicans, and even Polynesians, come from underprivileged backgrounds. The work Ryan has been doing to make these often forgotten segments of the community get the education and attention that they need has been nothing less than remarkable. He has 100% helped not only make the Jazz a better team, but also helped to make our community better as well. Sadly, and this is why I mention all this, not everyone shares that opinion. In a recent conference call giving an update on the statewide mask mandates and immunization efforts, Utah Governor Spencer Cox also gave praise to Ryan Smith's efforts, noting that his initiative has given underprivileged minority students over $1 million total in college scholarships. This unfortunately did not sit well with some that were watching the live feed. Privileged white parents declaring Christian and white persecution because how dare he give a black or Mexican money but not a white child? Yes, because one totally has something to do with the other. Right. Listen, 2 things. First, it should be noted that Ryan Smith is using his own money to do this. He's not using any money that he's making off the Jazz. He's not using any money that he's making off Qualtrics. He's using money out of his own pocket. I mean, we talk about this all the time, be it either in real life or on this podcast, how billionaires should use their money to benefit others more often. And here we are having an instance of someone finally doing the right thing, and our first instinct is, what about me? Again, and I keep repeating this point, for a group of people that specializes in telling others to hold themselves accountable and work for a living, conservatives sure do have this amazing skill of expecting to be the exception to both rules. Second, you have money. I'm assuming you go to church, and if you're going to church in Utah and you're complaining about white persecution, there's a good chance you're LDS. Sorry, not sorry. Do what every good LDS family does. Send your kid on a mission. That should more than pay for the old college tuition right there. Moral of the story, and I know it bears repeating, there is no such thing as white persecution in this country. You are not, I repeat, you are not being persecuted for the color of your skin. You're just no longer allowed to do this very same thing to others. This is not the 1950s. As much as you and your red hat wearing kinfolk would love for it to be, this is the year 2021. My advice to you is to grow up. So on the Closing Tag podcast, not only do you get my ramblings and rants about sports and politics and whatnot, you also get some solid and sound life lessons. In episode 5, I talk about some things that can help aspiring young developers in their career. And in episode 7, I asked the question, what do you want out of life? I know it's a touchy subject for some because they really don't know. Hell, I didn't even know until I was proposed that question not that long ago.
You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast.
So now normally I would come on here, talk about an awesome technology that I want to share with all of you, or even show off some pretty awesome web coding aspects of what I do on a daily basis. But today I thought I'd change it up a little bit. There's been some recent events in my personal life that have led me to reevaluate life choices that I've made over the last 12 years. And I want to share a revelation that I had the other night while I was in the process of quitting a job. And I want to share with you, particularly if you are a young, aspiring web developer or software engineer, and you want to pursue what's best for your career rather than what's best for your immediate future. You ready? It's twofold. First and foremost, it's okay to say no every once in a while. I've had to learn this lesson the hard way, and I'm only now starting to remotely get that concept. We're so caught up in the whole, yeah, I'll do this, yeah, I'll do this, yeah, I'll do this, thinking we're Superman. We can code an entire website in a day, right? But we can't. That's just the nature of it. That's just the reality of the situation. We cannot code an entire website in a single day, and especially if we're loading our plate like I've been doing lately, of 7, 8, 9, 10 projects at a time. I mean, I've had to manage over 200 websites at one particular point in time. I mean, how I survived that, I'll never know. But it happens. We tend to say yes too often. And it's up to us to know our limit. I'll get back to knowing your limit here in a bit. Also, it's okay to be selfish. Now, let me explain something. You should always, and I emphasize, you should always be professional. You should always let the company know that you have a better opportunity to advance your career, and you should always put 2 weeks notice in. This will give the company that you're leaving enough time to find a suitable replacement for you. It's just basic common decency, and as a wise man once told me, you never want to burn any bridges in this industry. Word gets around, people know. But also never apologize for taking an offer that better suits your needs or career desires. Now, whatever those desires are, whether it be money, whether it be the ability to work remotely, being able to learn this amazing new technology that you always wanted to notch on your resume, always look out for your best interests, but stay professional about it. It's okay to be selfish. It's also okay to be selfish and work fewer hours. There's a very weird misconception going on in this country, especially now in the pandemic era, that we should always be working, especially as entrepreneurs. Know your limit. Know how many hours you are going to be working, and know how many that you'll be able to work before you get to the point of burnout. And yes, burnout is an actual thing for developers. I've suffered burnout a couple of times myself in 2020 to the point where my head was hurting and my eyes were blurry. You don't want to overwork yourself. Ask for a break. Ask for a day off. If you have to take a sick day, do it. You're not going to lose your career if you take a day and relax. This is something I've had to learn over the past year, and maybe a little later than I would have liked, but hey, better late than never, right? Lastly, there's no reason to apologize for not taking an opportunity if it involves something you're not comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with, say, a certain technology like Python or C# or something, or if you're not comfortable relocating, or if you're not comfortable with traveling. I've had a couple of these in the past year as well. Usually I'm pretty open to relocating, But for me, it would have to be a pristine opportunity. It would have to be like the creme de la creme. I would have to make an insane amount of money for a straight 40-hour week in order for it to even be an option. I mean, let's face it, Utah has been my home for a good chunk of my life. I have family here. I don't want to just uproot my entire life for what I believe would be a parallel career move. And I suggest that you probably don't want to do the same either. Especially if you got family, especially if you've got, children, or you've got a spouse, if you've got any kind of obligation outside of just work. You want to make sure that you do what's best for you. So originally I had a pretty decent conversation lined up about acquiring skills and doing things that you only thought were impossible. But the other day I was talking to a client for work, and I had a better question posed by him, actually. I want to pose it with all of you listening to this right now. Well, as always, you are more than welcome to drop by our Discord or email me. Links will all be in the description. So after discussing progress on the website and how things are going, he asked me a question that I don't think I've thought of in a very long time. The question is the same one I'm going to ask everyone listening to this right now. It's a simple question, but it's also a very, I think, important question to keep in mind, to keep asking yourself repeatedly. What are your dreams? Like, what do you want to accomplish in this life? For me, it took me a minute, honestly, to think about that. I had to think very long and hard about it. And honestly, there isn't a lot that I desire out of life. I'm 42 years old. Most of my best days, most of my fun days, as they call it, are behind me. I don't really fancy for flashy cars or ritzy private jets or the 18-bedroom mansions anymore. I used to. It used to appeal to me, but it doesn't anymore. The pragmatist in me now sees the flashy car and sees an automatic speeding ticket. Or worse, it sees the private jet and asks, where are you going that requires a private jet when flying coach will suffice? It sees the mansion and asks, how the hell are you cleaning that all by yourself, and why do you need 18 rooms? I told him I don't really want anything extravagant in life. I want to be able to do the things that I love to do without fear of being told, no, you can't do this because you don't have enough money, or you have too much debt, or this and that. I want to be able to travel where I want, whether it's Japan or Scotland or Italy, hell, even China. And I have time to do it. And that's what I want to do. I want to be able to just say, okay, I'm going on a week's vacation here and go, Or even if it's just to, grab a chili dog from Chicago or a New York style pizza, or see what all the hype is about a Philly cheesesteak. Get some amazing halibut from Seattle. I mean, this is what I want to do. You'll notice a lot of my travel desires in life are food related. If I have my daughter or somebody that can share that experience with me, even better. I want to be able to look at a recipe and say, let's try cooking that tonight. Or when we have enough of the ingredients to pull it off. If we don't have enough, you just run to the store and grab it. I want to be able to work a limited schedule without worrying about being up till 2 a.m, either training or working to make to make a better life for myself. Wow. I want to be able to look at my bank account for once with pride rather than despair. But mostly, I want a quiet, peaceful life.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about living in rural Utah was that I was quiet. I could sit out on the front porch and not have to worry about police sirens or anything like that. So if I had the money to outright buy a cabin in the woods, either here in Utah or in Oregon or even in South Carolina where my sister lives, that would be more than ideal. All bills paid, no worrying about rent payments or having to pay on anything. Just be able to sit on the porch, listen to the birds, sip on coffee or beer, depending on what time of the day it is and what I got going on, and just take it all in. Everything else at that point would be gravy. See, here's the thing people need to understand as they're listening to me talk on this particular podcast. I don't do this podcast or the Game Stream Twitch channel or any of these other endeavors because I need the extra money. I've got the business, the Galactic Blue business, and I've got the full-time job. That handles my finances. I do this right here because it's something I love. I do it because I love doing this. I have loved being that radio guy since I was a kid, messing around with the grade school newspaper with my best friend at the time, reporting on the things that matters to us as kids. Who cares about all that boring stuff? Just get to the meat and potatoes of the matter here. I remember another friend of mine and I hanging out in my basement, acting as radio DJs, talking about the various topics of the day. I remember writing articles in sports sections of various websites, and my mom would read them. And in some ways, I think it brought her joy knowing I was doing something I loved to do and wanted to express interest in those things. So in a lot of ways, all of my experiences have led me to living my dream right now. And that is being a web developer, being a podcaster, and playing video games on Twitch for people to see. I don't have the cabin in the woods right now. I live in an apartment at the moment. I don't have the financial security or the flexibility, that I crave, but I'm working the dream job, which is being a web developer, being a software engineer. I get to do what I love, both as a business and as a hobby. I get to have my second hobby on full display on YouTube and Twitch, the Game Stream channel. And I get to do this. Granted, everybody and their sister right now has a podcast these days. Some people have two. But I still get to do this. I still have people listening. It doesn't matter to me if I only have 3 people listening or 300. It doesn't matter, where they are. If they're in Utah, if they're in upstate New York, if they're in Russia, or if they're in France. I appreciate all of them. I appreciate every single person that's listening to this. And for that, to each and every person, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching me on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for downloading the podcast and just setting it aside. It warms my heart to be able to do this and to have that validation of people actually listening. So again, thank you. Because this is technically a tech and development podcast, I do surprisingly, on occasion, talk about tech and development. One dev community that gets a lot of notoriety in the dev sector, almost by design, is PERL. That would be spelled PERL. You'll see a small example of why that is in an upcoming rant. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast.
finally, according to TechForge media editor Ryan Dawes, the Perl 5 community is in complete shock after the manager of the core Perl language, Sawyer X, announced he was leaving the community entirely. He announced that he won't even be attending the next Perl conference next month. After telling the core community that there is cruft being unused, unwanted, or badly designed code, in the language and that they need to drastically change with the times in order to prevent becoming the dinosaur of coding languages. Kind of late for that, don't you think? He says that he received numerous hostile messages from those within the community. Quote, "After saying this, I immediately received hostile messages. How dare I suggest we recognize there is cruft and that we would be happy if it weren't there. After all, there are emails by a few core developers who are on this list that say otherwise. Clearly, I must be forced to respond in detail. Evidently, my statement was so offensive to some that they were compelled to push me into a corner until I finally deactivated my social media account. There is just one example in a chain of continuous bullying and hostility I've been receiving in recent years, especially in the last year, at the hands of Perl community members. This caused me significant emotional distress over time, and I simply cannot handle it anymore, not mentally and definitely not emotionally." End quote. A few thoughts. First of all, a developer community, any developer community, should not only welcome or embrace the opportunity to grow and change with the times, they should consider it a challenge. Every developer out there, whether it be JavaScript, Java, PHP, Python, CSS, hell, even HTML, every language has undergone a drastic change in the last 10 years at one time or another. Perl seems to almost take pride in being the exception to the rule, and it's really not led them anywhere. If anything, the Perl community is almost looked down upon and laughed at by the rest of the community. They're considered like the outcasts of developers. Think about it. When was the last time that you heard a developer openly say, "Oh man, I really can't wait to learn about Perl so I can get that amazing Perl job"? Better question. When was the last time that you openly looked in Udemy or Perl site or any of these online course programs and actively looked for a Perl course? Second, as unfortunate as this sounds, bullying in the web development community is not that uncommon. Mostly it's done by those in one community or another towards another member or towards members of another community, i.e. JavaScript developers going after PHP developers, so forth. Usually it's not done within the same community. It's not uncommon, but as sad as that sounds, but that's usually how it goes. Lastly, I admire Sawyer's fortitude to point out the blatantly obvious. As someone that has had to work with Perl placeholders in a past job, I can definitely tell you the performance of Perl programming leaves a lot to be desired. I do hope Sawyer finds happiness wherever he goes from here, but this incident should not keep him or any developer from speaking up about crafting code. Part of the point of being in the developer community is trying to lift up one another and make each other better. And we can only do that by acknowledging when code, any code, is bad and work towards fixing it.
So, as a Utah Jazz fan and a basketball fan in general, it's important to keep up on other teams as well to see who could potentially stand out at any given point in time, namely the Suns and the Warriors right now. Recently, the Portland Trailblazers also stood out for all the wrong reasons. And just as a update on this particular story, their president of basketball operations ended up getting fired the other day because of investigations leading into allegations that he may have been sexually harassing and or abusing employees. So there's that. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast.
The one team that has a lot more than just angry fans on Twitter to worry about right now is the Portland Trailblazers. Let's take you on a trip and see what's been happening the last few weeks, shall we? So since their unceremonious dismissal from the NBA playoffs at the hands of the Denver Nuggets, Portland has decided to mutually agree to part ways with their head coach, Terry Stotts. By the way, can we all just agree that mutually agree to part ways is corporate speak for, yeah, he got fired? Essentially, especially when it's the organization's PR guy making the announcement and not the guy that's cleaning out his desk. Can we just agree on that? Cool. The coaching search has been going rather nicely, actually. They brought in a number of candidates, did their due diligence, and the search came down reportedly to 2 people. San Antonio assistant Becky Hammon, who has already proven that she can be a great asset to any team's coaching staff, and former Finals MVP and Clippers assistant Chauncey Billups. In the end, Billups was selected over the battle-tested Hammon. Reportedly, this did not sit well with the star point guard and the greatest Trailblazers player since the days of Clyde Drexler and Jerome Kersey, that of course being Damian Lillard. What came next is the stuff nightmare fuel is made from. During a press conference officially announcing Billups as the new coach, a question was lobbed at Billups regarding an incident back in 1997 involving a young woman. Now, being the man of independent research that I am, I dug up the incident in question. During his time in Boston in 1997, sexual assault charges were levied against Billups by a young woman accusing him of forcing himself onto her. The charges were eventually dropped and Billups settled the matter out of court. Now, on the surface, that doesn't look bad. At least not Kobe Bryant in Eagle, Colorado bad. But it still looks bad. It still looks really bad. However, his answer to the question seemed rather contrite and in a lot of ways remorseful. I mean, yeah, it's easily possible that he could have just rehearsed that reaction because, I mean, let's face it, in this day and age of every living being of influence, being held accountable for everything they've ever done, Billups had to know that situation was going to come up. Someone was going to ask the question. He had to have known that. So he probably rehearsed himself up, practiced in front of the mirror a few times, saying, oh, I'm so sorry that this happened. It's never going to happen again. I dealt with the matter and da-da-da-da. Whatever answer that he gave to the press regarding that. The follow-up interaction was, by any and all definitions, a PR nightmare. When another reporter decided to ask a follow-up question to the matter, the PR staff stepped in with, quote, "We've addressed this. It's been asked and answered, so happy to move on to the next question, end quote. I mean, whoa. I'm no PR expert. I don't play one on the radio or on internet, but that's a bad look. That is a catastrophically bad look. Even if you hired Donald Trump to be your next PR guy, I'm not sure you could look any worse. This has certainly gotten the attention of Lillard, who has reportedly become very disgruntled with the team between this and the continued playoff disappointments over the years. I mean, keep in mind, Portland has only been to the conference finals twice this century. In 2019, Lillard and company were emphatically swept by the Golden State Warriors. And before that, you'd have to go all the way back to that classic 7-game matchup against Shaq and Kobe's Lakers back in 2000. Damian Lillard has never won a conference finals game. Now, in a tweet that resurfaced from back in 2016, this is around the same time that he was rumored to be in negotiations for a new Supermax deal, Lillard was asked by some fans what his preference would be of where he'd like to play. His response, and I quote, "If Portland doesn't want me, Lakers or Jazz." End quote. Lakers is understandable because it's the Lakers, but for those that don't understand the Jazz aspect of it, let me just kind of break it down. Lillard went to school at Weber State University, which is located in Ogden, Utah. Go Wildcats. He went to school for 4 years in Utah. He knows the area. He knows the people here. He's greeted every time he comes to play against the Jazz to a hero's welcome. I mean, he's practically Jimmer Fredette if Jimmer Fredette had actual basketball skills. So it's understandable he'd want to come back. It's understandable that he'd want to return to Utah. Here's the problem with both of those scenarios. Short of giving up draft picks they don't currently own, or star players they have no intention of giving up, least of all LeBron with the Lakers, neither LA nor Utah is getting Damian Lillard anytime soon. Just recently signed a new 4-year extension worth over $176 million that runs to 2025. He will be earning nearly $40 million next season. So just to match the salary of the guy, the Jazz would have to give Portland a ton of assets. Assets Portland may or may not even want. And the Lakers, I mean, forget about it. The only realistic possibility of even coming close to matching that salary would be to give Portland either LeBron James or Anthony Davis. 2 players the Lakers have already stated are untouchable, and for good reason. Make no mistake though, the threat of trading Damian Lillard is real. Just because his preferred destinations are incapable of getting him this time around, that doesn't mean other teams are out of the running as well. Miami could always be a player. Denver is said to be interested in him. There's even talks of the Nets possibly giving Portland Kyrie Irving. Yes, I was right all along about Kyrie Irving. I am going to keep repeating that now. I mean, Portland is a hot mess. With ownership in a massive state of flux since the death of Paul Allen, it's really easy to see why. The best run teams in sports usually have good, solid, competent ownership that lets the business people handle business and the sports people handle sports. Up until Allen's death, Portland was one of those teams. Now they have a general manager that has no idea what he's doing, a coaching staff that feels makeshifted together, and a disgruntled point guard. Oh, and arguably the worst PR team in the league. Seriously, if that PR person worked for my company, he would be fired on the spot after that statement. Just saying.
So, goes without saying, the video game industry is chock full of unscrupulous, unsavory, even downright deplorable people. But very few studios can match the level of depravity that Activision Blizzard has reached. And as a quick update for this story as well, one of the co-leaders of Activision Blizzard, Jen O'Neill, has resigned from her post stating, quote, lack of equal pay and humiliating working conditions. So they have that going for them, which is nice. Titanic, meet Iceberg. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast.
I'm back on the road again.
So I want to preface this first hot take with the following warning. There may or may not be some graphic content in there. You've been warned. So, story that as a gamer I've been following now for the last several months has really come to a head recently. Blizzard Entertainment President J. Allen Brack has announced that he is stepping down. This, of course, coming on the heels of a sexual harassment lawsuit filed in the state of California. Jen O'Neill and Mike Ibarra were named the new co-leaders of Blizzard. Brack said that they can be trusted to lead with the highest levels of integrity and commitment to the components of our culture that make Blizzard so special, quote unquote. That's a laughable statement. I'll tell you why in a minute. The lawsuit was filed after a 2-year investigation into Blizzard, Activision, whichever, and alleged that the company had a, quote, pervasive frat boy workplace culture. Many of the complaints took place before Brack actually became the president of the company back in 2018. Several women employees said that Blizzard encouraged events like cube crawls, during which male staff members would, quote, drink copious amounts of alcohol as they crawl their way through various cubicles in the office and often engage in inappropriate behavior towards female employees, end quote. In the response to the lawsuit, well, actually, let me backtrack. There's more. Shockingly enough, one Blizzard employee took her own life during a company retreat after being subjected to constant sexual harassment, including, and this is the part that I was warning you about, having nude photos circulated at a company holiday party. This is the kicker. This is why I was laughing at that quote earlier. In response to the lawsuit, Activision Executive VP Fran Townsend told employees in the email that the claims were, quote, distorted and untrue, adding that it was truly meritless and irresponsible. Now, this is just a bizarre, just completely messed up turn of events. I'm not even reading from a script at this point. This is my own personal feeling. I didn't have time to type up my thoughts. So if it sounds like I'm at a loss for words, it's probably because I am. I have been an employee of, I'd say, 5 or 6 companies in the last 20 years, including my time with the Internal Revenue Service several web developer jobs, and I can honestly tell you every single one of those employers have training, sexual harassment training, that actually says that this type of behavior that Activision is being accused of is wrong. And I always joke and say, well, I mean, I'm going to go in for my annual common sense training, because to people like me, it's common sense. It's common decency. You don't pass around nude photos on company time. You don't even look at nude photos during company time. You don't even look at like even remotely sexual, images on company time. And you most certainly don't go around and harassing female employees like the way that Activision has been accused of, whether you're on company time or not. And the fact that these people have been doing it for seemingly 4, 5, 6 years is baffling to me. But what's even more baffling is the fact that these people have been getting away with it for the last 5, 6, 7 years. I honestly could not even begin to imagine what those employees that have to put up with this are going through. I mean, one of them, you heard me say it in the press release, took her own life. And the fact that Activision would then turn around and say that these claims were meritless, and that they were, what was the exact quote? Let me pull it back up here. Meritless and irresponsible, the claims were distorted and untrue. Even after a female employee took her own life? Are you freaking kidding me? This sort of thing, with companies, not holding themselves accountable. I mean, yes, I've worked with Amazon. I worked with a company, and yes, the horror stories that you hear about Amazon are true, in that employees are not really allowed to take bathroom breaks. They get like 2 5 or 10 minute breaks and a lunch break, and that's it. That's literally it. Even Amazon, on their worst day, is not capable of something like this. Even Amazon on their worst day, even Jeff Bezos on his worst day, would have enough PR sense to not say something like this. It is just baffling to me that Activision, and Blizzard, one of the biggest video game makers in the world, they brought World of Warcraft, for crying out loud, Call of Duty. These people should be looking to try and do PR repair and basically say, we're looking into this, we're cooperating with the authorities, da-da-da-da. But instead, they're like, basically saying that the claims are meritless and irresponsible and distorted. What part of several male employees are drinking copious amounts of alcohol as they crawl their way through various cubicles in the office and often engage in inappropriate behavior towards female employees? What part of that is distorted? Please enlighten me. And then Brack, who is clearly not, innocent in any right. I mean, he practically stepped down, once the bleep hit the fan. He's like, yeah, these two guys that are taking over for me, they can be trusted. We're good. We're good. No, you're not. And so for me, as a gamer, it speaks to me that these people are not capable of any rational thinking. I mean, this is a company very similar to Rockstar, which is another video game company, who's notorious for working their employees to the bone and not setting realistic release dates, but instead it's like, yeah, we can release it at this time this year, and basically works their employees like 12-hour days. Oh, by the way, they don't get benefits and they don't get overtime pay, so there's that. The video game industry, and I hate to say this because, again, I am a gamer, but the video game industry is notorious for working their employees over just to death and having these type of frat boy, environments, because unfortunately, and this is the sad truth, there's not a lot of female representation in the video game industry. There just isn't. Just like there's not a lot of female representation in web development. Speaking as someone that works in web development. And, this type of behavior, you can get away with it when there's not as many women around. But according to this lawsuit, it's being filed by at least a dozen women over the years. On top of that, Brack, who is, clearly the worst of the bunch, every time that someone would go to HR and say, hey, this is what's happening to me, I would like to report it, and da-da-da-da, the HR would then go straight to Brack and tell them about it, and he would go and, either reprimand or fire the employee. I hate to break it to you, Alan, that's called retaliation. Also illegal. So I hope that the state of California if this goes to federal level, the US, I hope someone nails these people to the wall, because stuff like this should not be allowed to continue. It doesn't matter what industry it is. It doesn't matter, who it's against or whatnot. It doesn't matter who's doing the deed. This type of behavior should not be happening, period. And I hope for everybody's sake that the appropriate parties are held accountable for their actions. And by the way, if I'm a video game industry, if I'm like Rockstar or EA or 2K or any of these other companies, and I'm looking to hire a new executive, and if the name Alan Brack or Jen O'Neill or Mike Ibarra are anywhere on my list of interviews, I'm canceling that thing. I'm saying, I'm going to go to lunch. Bye. Because I don't want that coming into my house, into my domain, and infecting my employees the way that Blizzard and Activision have clearly been infected.
Nobody cares about my white boy blue.
So anybody that knows anything about tech or social media or anything in 2021 has heard of OnlyFans. the controversial subscription-based streaming service that is most popular for its pornographic content. Well, for a while there, it looked like OnlyFans was about to take billions of dollars out to the backyard, pour gasoline on it, and set it on fire. But then cooler heads prevailed. But in this rant, I talk about how the backlash towards OnlyFans is emblematic of a much larger judgmental problem in society, and you'll see what I mean here in a bit. Also, stay tuned after this rant for a special look at some of our previous interviews. You're listening to the best of the Closing Tag podcast.
I'm back on the road again.
So a tech story that I've been following lately has gotten pretty crazy, has been the situation with OnlyFans. Now, to describe this platform in a manner that fits the PG format of this podcast is going to be a little tricky, but let's try it anyway. OnlyFans is a service similar to Patreon where people can go and post content in hopes of obtaining donations from passing patrons. The part where it gets a little controversial is that the majority of content on OnlyFans tends to lean very steeply into the realm of porn. In fact, it is said that a vast majority of content on OnlyFans is classified as pornographic by nature. Well, the British-based subscription service that has taken off like a rocket took a huge gamble last month in announcing that it would start to ban sexually explicit content starting in October. This caused a lot of buzz, mostly bad, on social media, drawing comparisons to what would happen if TikTok banned cute animal videos. I mean, apples to oranges, but I see your point. Such a move would stifle a very big majority of content on the service and cut off a major piece of revenue, not just for the service, but also for those using the service to make a decent living. Well, turns out that the folks at OnlyFans had a slight change of heart because 1 week after announcing the ban on adult content, say that 5 times fast, OnlyFans announced that it was retracting said ban. Well, okay, their exact term was they're suspending the ban. We'll see. Co-founder and adult performance entrepreneur Tim Stokely had given an interview blaming the decision on banks refusing to work with the platform and then announced that a deal had been reached that would allow business as usual to continue. Lola Hunt, a Melbourne-based sex worker who may or may not have that as her legal name, added that, quote, considering that they've said suspended the ban, not that they aren't going through with it, I think they're going to go through with the ban in a few weeks' time. The community is very on edge at the moment. Every time a site goes down, our client base is fractured. It's like running a brick and mortar shop and being chased out of town by religious zealots every 6 months. End quote. Again, apples to oranges, but I see your point. Now the story just gets wilder from here. Stokely, the guy who created the site, originally created OnlyFans as a family business backed with a loan from his father Guy, a former executive at Barclays Bank who continues to sit on the board and is not to be confused with Blue Shirt Guy in that movie Free Guy that's out right now. His brother is the COO of OnlyFans and his mother is a director of the parent company. OnlyFans continues to pride itself as a way for any content creator to sell subscription content, with the majority of the promotional power being directed to cooking and fitness users, but you didn't know that, while downplaying the extent of its true core business, which is porn. OnlyFans has also gone on a publicity push, employing the mainstream PR agency W Communications who's also done PR work for companies like British Airways, Disney, and Jaguar Land Rover. And while it is a booming business model, one that is projected to see the company reach over $2.5 billion, that's with a B, dollars in pure profit by 2022, I'm pretty sure that's American dollars, not British pounds, it's also a flawed one. Many are claiming that the site has no way of monitoring the content or preventing what many would consider underage or revenge porn to appear on the website. However, OnlyFans recently denied that calls for action were issued as official guidance saying, quote, "We do not tolerate any violation of our terms of service and we take immediate action to uphold the safety and security of our users," end quote. It also added that it uses, quote, "a combination of state-of-the-art technology together with human monitoring and review to prevent children under the age of 18 from sharing content on OnlyFans," end quote. So my take on all of this is as follows. I can see where this is a very tricky and very rough situation to navigate around. Banks are not likely to help fund a website in which the majority of its content is considered sexually explicit. But without that content, OnlyFans doesn't reach $2.5 billion before the end of this year. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. Furthermore, the discussion has been beaten into the ground by now on social media about how many criticize the people on this site for, quote, "not having a real job." Listen, my official stance is this. If it's not hurting anybody, I can argue having a highly lucrative account on OnlyFans is no different than making a lot of money streaming gaming online or providing content on YouTube. And in fact, I set the same feeler out as our official discussion of the week topic. And without, naming names or, revealing what the answers were exactly, the overwhelming majority, in fact, practically everybody that responded to that questionnaire said that yes, it is the exact same. Earning money from OnlyFans is the exact same as earning money from Twitch. It just so happens that a lot of people on OnlyFans have found financial success selling sex. Say that 5 times fast. These same people making the argument that they should get real jobs are the same ones working 12-hour days, working themselves to an early retirement, while content creators are making just as much money, if not more, doing what they love to do. So to me, that qualifies as a real job. If you're putting food on the table and you're putting a roof over your head, that counts as a real job, as long as you're not selling drugs. Entrepreneurship has this weird fascination in today's culture in that if you start a small business out of a mom and pop shop or even online selling artsy stuff, you're viewed as a self-starter and revered. But if you try to do the same thing, doing something you're passionate about and good at, like say streaming video games, you're considered lazy and should focus on getting a real job. I would argue streaming video games or creating content on a YouTube channel or Patreon or OnlyFans is a real job. I challenge anybody that uses that lame and tired shtick to try and do it themselves. It is not as easy as a lot of these people make it look. I have a friend that I'm likely to bring on the podcast in a future episode that will tell you that it's significantly hard work. There's prep work, finding out what works best for your channel, what doesn't, what you're good at, what you're not, being engaging with your audience. That's the biggest one, regardless of what platform or content you're using. and so forth. I have a lot of respect for the bootstrappers that can go in for 12 hours, put forth physical effort to put food on the table because, hey, I've been there. But I can also objectively look at and respect the content creating entrepreneurs who are making north of 6 figures a year doing something that they love to do, because I'm trying to get there myself. Again, not as easy as it looks. As for OnlyFans, this is going to be a very pivotal next 4 months. How they respond to all the challenges that they are about to and are currently facing will define what kind of company, both tech and otherwise, they will be going forward. James Scott is my guest.
In terms of actually the religion of football itself, football is very sacred to British people, and it is something that when you grow up, when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, you go play for a soccer team. That's where you go. You go play for a soccer team, and you come through the age groups, and eventually, hopefully, if you're very, very, very lucky, you get to play professionally. Now, the number of kids that start off at 4 or 5 years old playing soccer to those that turn pro is very few and far between, and that's simply because it's cheaper to buy in an import from Europe than it is to have someone come through all these age groups, and it costs lots of money. So it doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's great.
Ben Phipps is my guest. Ben, and what's your school of thought on self-training versus boot camping or formal training?
But going back to school and getting a computer science degree wasn't really viable. It wasn't what I could do. I looked into boot camps, and you're staring down the barrel of a $10,000 bill just to go there, and even still, that certificate won't get you a job.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to learn as much as I can about the current technologies, and as you know, having done this, you learn one technology only for that to change or evolve into another technology. So I said, okay, what does the market need now? So I am 100% team self-taught all the way.
McLean Lindquist is my guest. Can you give a general idea of just how vastly talented and underrated Utah's music scene really is?
Yeah, it's really just the arts. It's from dance and photography, theater, and that drifts over into music as well. And it's always been vibrant, at least what I've experienced. And it kind of ironically, the first Utah band that I got into, and they're still one of my favorite bands, and they were a very seminal hardcore or post-hardcore band from the early 90s called Iceberg. And I think they formed in 90. And they are and were groundbreaking, but they just released a new album a month and a half ago or so, and it's phenomenal. It's one of the best albums. It's their best album for sure. It's just 2 songs. They're kind of an experimental hardcore band. It's they're very unique. They have elements of jazz and experimental music as well, progressive music. But this album is very kind of doom, very Black Sabbath. Meets a hardcore punk rock band, and the songs, each one of them are like 18 minutes long. There's 2 songs, and they're just it takes a while to understand the progressions, because they do progress. They don't revisit ideas. The song just keeps moving, and just beautiful. Once you catch that wave, it takes a while though, because it's really dense music. But once you do, it's incredible. It's just really heavy, doomish kind of. Don't want to say metal, but people that like metal would get into that. And it's unfortunate they're just not, like, they are on the underground tip, and but known. They should have been one of those bands from the 90s that was like on the cusp of about to blow up. But never did. But they're still making music. Gentry Densley, and he has Eagle Twin as well. That's on Southern Lord, both albums. That's the guys from Sun. and so they put out like Earth and a lot of other heavy music. That's Engine Kid. They're from Seattle. So yeah, but Seattle and Salt Lake are kind of similar. Speaking of, in that regard of when Seattle, when those germs of bands of the pre-grunge and then what became grunge had, there's kind of a similar vibe here in Utah where it's incestuous. So a lot of people play with other people in bands.
Cruise Control is our guest. How insane do you think Salt Lake's going to grow after that?
Well, I mean, it's already going pretty crazily with our housing market. It's
yeah.
nuts. So I live in a 667 square foot home. It's not even 1,000 square feet. And my house almost goes for $300,000. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. So yes, it's going to go ridiculously insane because of that exposure. And not only that, but don't forget we got the NBA All-Star game coming into town.
Oh yeah, that's not that far away. That's like 2
years
right?
away. So we got that also coming into town.
Oh, that's gonna be fun.
Oh yeah, I'm getting my tickets. I can't wait. Hasn't been here since 1992. I want to say
93.
93.
I remember that
The
year.
Salt Palace. It was at the Salt Palace.
No, it was at the Dutch Center.
Was it? Oh, yeah, that's right. It was
Yep.
at the Dutch Center. You're right.
Because it just shortly because they
It
were
just
in that whole like.
barely it opened for like a couple of years.
Let's throw these arenas that have just barely opened the phones. Like, okay, you get the All-Star game in 2 years, you get the All-Star game in 3 years. And I remember Stockton Malone winning the co-MVPs. That was amazing.
That was cool.
Yeah.
See, when I went to that, because I attended that, but I was like 9, like I forget how old it is. Like I was so young now. So now I can go and be ridiculous and drink alcohol, which is what I want to do.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I may have to join you on that one.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Yes, to answer your question, it's definitely going to explode the population and get much more crazier. So yes, be prepared, Utah.
Absolutely. TJ, what's up, my man?
Rudy Gay, first of all, let's hit him first. I know he's going to be not ready to go by the beginning of the season, is what the newest reports have said.
Yeah.
But he's huge. Like, he's a huge upgrade. We could do the small 5 for him.
Yep.
Small ball 5. Whiteside, I mean, man, a few years back when he was in Portland, he was giving Rudy a run for his number.
Yo.
So having him as a backup, we got the best 2 defensive centers in the league right there. Starter and backup.
Oh.
Jared Butler, he's gonna get some playing time. I think he's got the skill. The heart thing, they cleared him to play. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah. I'm not worried about it.
Oh, not at all.
I'll talk hot sauce all day. I could do a whole podcast on it, so you let me know when you want to cue that up. I have things to say.
All right, we'll see if we can arrange that for the next podcast interview. McLean, my buddy, we've come a long way from the Wednesday meetings at the Village Inn in Roy.
My favorite logo, still the Basement Pros, is the original record, the BMW rip. Still this day, I have those shirts, and I love that.
So sincerely and honestly, from me to you, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, and I will see you guys back here mid-January for an all-new episode of the Closing Tag podcast. Thanks for watching and listening. See ya.
On that, our presentation.